Aloha, hello everybody, this is Aliga, the HawaiianBLANKA, and welcome to my very first top 10 list on video games that deserve a reboot or remake. For this list, in my opinion, these 10 games deserve a reboot or a remake, and also based on certain criteria. The games themselves have been left in the dust and completely forgotten. There was a reboot or remake made already, but it didn't meet expectations, or there was one that was supposed to be in the making, but for various reasons didn't come through. These games will also be disagreeable on this list to you, so let me know in the comments of what games you wish should have made the list. Now with that out of the way, let's get started! Twisted Metal was one of those games that you played that you felt like you didn't have to worry about racing to drive a vehicle, and instead you just go around shooting, blowing shit up, random cars, any kind of vehicles that you want, ridiculous as they may be, blowing up your enemies, your friends, and even the freaking Eiffel Tower. And that's what made the game fun. But as other games came out for the franchise, no matter how good the graphics got, I feel like the destruction part just made it seem like it was pretty flat. Now with games like Onrush, where it's solely based on vehicles destroying other vehicles for points to win random games and rounds, I just feel like this kind of mechanics and design would actually benefit a remake or a reboot for Twisted Metal that the other ones couldn't do previously. And with these kind of graphics and just look at this kind of impact and adrenaline rush that this kind of game would add to Twisted Metal for his reboot, I feel like it would actually justify Twisted Metal and bring back its former glory. I love shooter games. I love dinosaurs. I love shooter games with dinosaurs. Except this one. Toric was one of my favorite games as a kid just because it had those two things and it was fucking awesome. Going around adventuring every single area, killing dinosaurs to hybrids to aliens with every single weapon that you could carry, it was still pretty fun. Even if I was a kid and I didn't know what the hell I was doing half the time, but regardless, it was still one of my favorite games to play. Now I know what you're saying, they had a remake back in 2008 and it was alright, but they remade the whole story of what made Toric Toric. They go from you going in guns blazing or bow and arrow ready to be let loose, to you with a campaign of other soldiers and killing random things like this in weird ways, even to a final T-Rex boss that didn't really live up to the hype that it ended the game pretty boring. All you do is hide, shoot, and the T-Rex barely even tries to follow you. Just go back to the way the Toric should have been, you going in by yourself and hunting everything close range and bring back the suspense. In the Hunt was one of the arcade games that I first played on the PlayStation console, with this traditional side-scroller, bright colors, and very nostalgia sound effects. It was just a lot of fun to play, with all the craziness going on, blowing up ships and other submarines, as well as fighting bosses at the end of every level, like this King Ghidorah and freaking Gamera hybrid, to this many-faced statue guy that looks like he could have played the many-faced god in the Game of Thrones series. All these levels were just so exciting that I wish stuck around more back in the day. You know, the only thing you get something close to this is Metal Slug. But if this thing was to be remade into consoles nowadays, I would gladly buy it, and I really hope it does. Snowbird Kids was one of those games that you didn't really know existed until you heard somebody else talk about it. And as cartoony as this game looks and sounds, it was still a pretty fun game to play, even as an adult. Once in a while, if there was an opportunity, me and my sisters will still pop this game in and we will still challenge each other if we got better or if we got worse. It was also a good change of pace if you didn't want to play Mario Kart or Diddy Kong Racing, but you still wanted to have some kind of racing game. This was also around the same time that N64 was busting out other snowboarding games such as 1080 and XXF Tricky, so it was a nice change. When Snowbird Kids 2 came out, it only improved from the first game. It included a trick challenge that you had to get as much points as you can in one lap, going to the shop to improve your boards level to improve your performance, as well as other levels that you got to race on that didn't only involve snow. There were also 3 bosses in the story mode that you had to either defeat in a race or by destroying his health by throwing bombs at it, like this robot snowman that turns you into one, a giant dinosaur in the jungle, or a little devil boy and his robot where you had to beat him and his health while throwing bombs at him while you're racing through a blizzard and avoiding his debris. I really feel like this game deserves to be brought back just because it was so much fun for everybody to play, kids or adults. If they could bring these kids back as teens and still have the same kind of attitude towards each other, I think it would be pretty awesome. Darkstalkers was one of Capcom's best games that they made back in the day, and it wasn't even a Street Fighter game. With the art concept very similar as much as the gameplay as well, is the reason why. With a small selection of unique characters in my opinion, the very sad thing is, only 2 of them have really remained relative throughout the years, that being Felicia and Morrigan. I guess it was just fan service for finding busty women fighters. But the rest of the characters in the full franchise deserve their own time in the spotlight and in their own game, not making cameo appearances in cross games like Marvel vs. Capcom. If Capcom can bring the fan base to Monster Hunter like they did with Monster Hunter World, they can do the same thing for Darkstalkers, and I'm pretty sure, guarantee, that everybody's gonna be jumping on that. Who will rule the new Earth? Primal Rage was one of the games that if you grew up as a kaiju fan watching Godzilla and Gamera, this was the game that you had to get for the SNES. Now you go through all 7 areas of the continent and the 1 island, and you have to fight all the rest of the giant monsters in order to conquer the entire Earth. Because if you played as a different character, you would have to start all over again. The whole thing that made this concept cool is that you're playing as a giant animal god, and this game also had Mortal Kombat style fatalities at the end of each match. Also, you have to go through all of them one time in one life in order to beat the entire game. Now that where Primal Rage had its second game, I feel like it didn't do as well just because of the human avatars that they featured in it. Even if the gameplay and the sound effects and the whole entire look of it was so awesome. But I feel like if they took out the human avatars for the giant monsters and just kept it to giant monsters, especially with Godzilla being so popular and just being released, I know that this game being brought back as a remake would be awesome. Now I mentioned Diddy Kong Racing earlier in the video, but it had to be this high up on the list because it was that good of a game. Diddy Kong Racing featured a lot of characters in the roster that you never even heard of before besides Conker, and even Banjo appears in here way before his own game came out. From racing to boats to flying in the plane, this game had so many different options that never happened before. Even the boss is something that you never heard of before, like a pig wizard. Like, what the hell is a pig wizard? But who cares? The game was so fun, and you had different options to play. With this game, it should be automatic that this has to be remade by Nintendo. Like, hurry up already. .3D fighters like Soul Edge, Street Fighter EX, and the Tekken series, one of the first I played was Rival Schools, and at first I didn't know what to think about it, but as I played more, it got me interested to play it over and over again, and something out of an anime. The whole story and the whole background of it, just students fighting each other from the same or other schools, and even teachers, made me feel like it was something that you come home from school and you actually had to get your frustration out from somebody that you didn't like at school, or you know, whether it's a teacher or not, and you know, satisfy your need to do something very violent towards them. But at least this game somewhat did that for me. Batsu, the main character and mascot of the whole franchise, was popular enough to even be featured in Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, and it's one of its flashier games. And it made you feel like this game was going to have its own remake over the horizon, but for some reason it didn't. For being one of the very first 3D fighting games out there with its own unique concept and story, this game deserves a reboot overall so far on this list any of the games mentioned. Please bring it back.
This is but a taste of the dark side.
Truly deserving of the number 2 spot on this list is Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, and here's why. If there wasn't a Halo game that made you get an Xbox, it was Star Wars KOTOR. If it wasn't for this game, the whole entire franchise probably would have been dead right after. But this game truly deserves its own reboot. It needs better graphics and just keep the same concept of how the gameplay was. Then I think this would actually be so awesome. I think everybody will be jumping on this. From different dialogue choices from BioWare that you're so known for doing, such as the Mass Effect games, different outcomes come out as well. Your build matters, your allies matter, it's just not going in guns blazing. Every little decision that you make makes a big difference. It could mean you staying on the light side, but you could turn one of your allies to the dark side and possibly try to fight them and kill them. You could even turn yourself to the dark side and destroy your former allies. Every little decision made a big difference to your gameplay, your story, everything. That's what made this game so awesome in the first place. Just update the graphics and keep the gameplay and the whole concept of strategy instead of just powering through everything. And that's what the game is going to be like. Just updated graphics. But it's so well deserved. Is there a reason why that Banjo-Kazooie does not deserve the number 1 spot on this list? It was the very first game that I played when I got my very first N64 on Christmas, and it's been one of my favorite games ever since, and probably one of the best games that ever came out for the system. From transforming into many different things like an ant or an alligator or whatever you had to for certain mini games to get certain jiggies or certain areas, from you just venturing on your own as your companion, from flipping to jumping to gliding to flying and even shooting eggs, to going around to help explore the worlds to find collectibles like musical notes, mumble skulls, feathers, finding Jinjos, and the most prized possession in the game, the golden jiggies, in order to venture further into the game. When Banjo-Tooie came out, it was everything that Banjo-Kazooie was in the game, but just better. It gave you a deeper relationship with the other side characters than just going to them for certain things, and it also gave you new moves for exploring or for solving puzzles, and as well as other collectibles and even unique new boss fights. Unfortunately, it would be going downhill for the Baron Bird with a barely playable game on the Game Boy Advance to a very criticized sequel with nuts and bolts on the 360. It seemed like the animal duo would never bounce back, until it was announced at E3 this year that Banjo-Kazooie has returned as DLC characters for the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate game. With this in mind, fans are having very high hopes in that Banjo-Kazooie could have a remake of its own game to return to the gaming world that it so rightfully deserves. Well, anyways, that is my top 10 list, guys. Tell me what you guys think, if there's something that could have been on the list, or if you agree or disagree with anything. Other than that, please like and subscribe. I'm Malika, the Hawaiian Blanca. I spoke to you guys later. Shoots. Aloha.